Welcome to the Healing Grove podcast. I'm Dr. Kristin, an integrative holistic family physician, author of Life After Lyme, and host in this virtual space of learning, healing, and growing. I believe humans are like trees, and our physical limb is only one of many. Health on all limbs of the tree, emotional, conceptual, social, spiritual, is absolutely required for the whole tree that is you to be vibrantly well. I created the Healing Grove podcast as a place to showcase some of the world's best integrative and holistic medicine, to expose you to transformative tools and mindset shifts for all limbs of your tree. I hope you enjoy our conversation in the Healing Grove today as much as I enjoyed having it. Welcome everyone to the Healing Grove podcast. We had some technical difficulties, but here we are. I'm your host, Kristin, as you probably know. And as you also probably know, my guest today is Dr. Meghan Tveit. Meghan Tveit has been on the podcast several times before. We sort of have done a little chronological journey through medical school with Meghan, and now she is beyond medical school in residency in her first year of an OBGYN residency. And I'm so excited to get your update, Meghan.
Hello, coming to you live from the streets of New York City. That might give a little bit away as to where I landed, but here we are. We made it, folks. After the long-awaited time, we are officially in the Big Apple.
What a long journey it's been. So I'm sure everybody who's followed you in the past wants to know, how is it on the other side of medical school?
Oh my goodness, where do I begin? It is so much better than medical school. It is exceeding my expectations beyond belief. I think for starters, as a medical student, it can be really challenging. I think I spoke about this in prior podcasts. It can be very challenging to know your role. And I would always just try to make it my mission to find a role and own it, but never really feeling like I was having a huge impact or just having autonomy over how I care for patients. And now as a resident and with a doctor in front of my name, it's this totally new responsibility. And I just feel like I have more control and more power over the decisions that I get to make than ever before. And I get to be a part of a really incredible team. And it has been fantastic, honestly. I am very pleased.
Beautiful. Well, tell us a little bit about what's been, I mean, you knew some of it was going to be awesome. Have there been any surprises, anything that's sort of pleasantly delightful that you didn't expect?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm in OBGYN residency as a first year, which they call us interns. So you go from you graduating medical school and they call you a doctor, and then you show up to the first day of residency feeling on cloud nine, and all of a sudden you're an intern, which feels very demoralizing. However, it's a good place to start because the world of medicine is complicated. And so we have to start from the bottom. And I would say the most challenging, or maybe not even surprising, I think I went into OBGYN residency, especially in New York City, knowing that it was going to be incredibly challenging, just the sheer hours. But what has been the most rewarding and pleasantly surprising aspect of my program is the people. I was terrified going into interview season, trying to suss out who and what dynamics these different programs had and who was going to be on my team when the going got tough. And I can say with a lot of confidence that everyone that I am working with now at the program that I landed at is incredibly hardworking, is incredibly motivating, great teachers, great leaders, and I could not be more pleased with just the day-to-day aspect of this role. Because I'm spending 80 to 90 hours a week at the hospital, one can only hope that the people you're surrounding yourself with during those long hours are people that are inspiring and uplifting and good communicators and leaders. And I think that I see that in all of my residents, which has made all the difference for sure.
Amazing. Yeah, not all places are equal, right? In terms of the culture that you land in and the people who make up that culture and create it together. So
Mhm.
you mentioned 80 to 90 hours. Did you just get your program in trouble?
Well, so there are different loopholes, I guess you can call them, but they allow you
Actually,
to
and
stay
first,
within the rules.
before we talk about the loopholes, talk about the actual rules and where that came from, because that actually changed when I was in medical school. They went
Mhm.
from having sort of
Yes.
no cap on hours to an 80-hour work week. But tell us about the loopholes because they definitely exist.
So yes, there is a cap to residency hours, which is at 80 hours a week. And I don't even know how, before this law was placed, how they got away with residents working like 100 hours a week. I think there was truly programs where residents were working 100 hours. And I don't know about you, but going into a surgery with a doctor on their 99th hour that week doesn't sound super safe or something that I personally would desire. So I don't know how that was possible. 80 to me feels still like an incredible amount of hours. So once that law was in place, basically residents were capped at 80 hours. However, it's 80 hours averaged over a 2-week period. So you can have a week where you're working 12 days straight, which is what I sometimes would do. I'll work 12 days straight, 12-hour shifts, 12 to 14 hours. But again, you're logging them. So you're logging them to make sure that it's like your set shift. And the reason I can do 12 is because this is an average over a 2-week period, not just that set week. And so it means that sometimes I'm working 90, sometimes I'm working 75, sometimes I'm working 80. It kind of depends.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for explaining that. And I remember bumping up against that loophole and being like, really? They made a loophole. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a lot. It's a lot of hours.
It's a
So
lot of hours.
so you're working a ton of hours, but every time I talk to you, you have a smile on your face and a sparkle in your eye. What's up with that?
Well, I don't actually, if you would have told me when I was in med school that these would be my hours and that I wasn't going to be perpetually ill, on the brink of depression, and just not the best version of myself, I would have laughed in your face because I feel like I am I just need sleep. Like I truly am a firm believer that I am an 8 hours per night person in order to function optimally. And I still believe that. However, I've also come to realize that in this career, because I am on my feet, I'm moving around, I'm interacting with people who are incredibly vulnerable and need me at my 100% at all times. I have this inner strength that I honestly didn't know that I had. And so in that, 80th hour, when I'm going into another delivery and, a patient who has never been in this experience before, where they're in a lot of pain, their body is changing in ways that the human mind can hardly comprehend. And they're pushing out a new life into this earth. I can find strength in that moment, knowing that this is arguably one of the best days of their life. And I really try to enter those rooms, reminding myself of that. And with that as my everyday, it's just impossible to yawn or to be tired or to feel like I'm drained because I just get so much energy from my surroundings.
Yeah. You're making me miss OB a lot.
I know it's a very special world. Every time I step foot onto labor and delivery, It's just like a new sense of being. There's just so much life. Every day is a birthday party. However, it's also at a baseline, it's a very, very happy place. But I would say the lows on the labor and delivery floor can be the lowest of any floor of the hospital. And so although the baseline of my day is so exciting, there's also something to be said about the lows in this field, because things don't always go well when it comes to delivery. And that is not something to overlook.
Yeah. Have you had some sad experiences already?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to give kind of context, being in New York City, our volume is incredibly high. So I'm in my 4th month of residency, and I've already delivered just shy of 200 babies. And I'm operating in the OR, doing C-sections as the primary surgeon with my attending across from me. And so as someone that is getting exposure to incredible amounts of volume, you can imagine that for every 10 wonderful deliveries, there's going to be something that goes wrong. And yeah, we've had some really tragic cases, and those ones are ones that will live with me forever. You can imagine if someone that's 22 weeks pregnant comes in, their water broke, they're in labor, and they have to make a decision in 30 minutes whether they or not they want our NICU team, who is capable of resuscitation at that gestational age, which is not typical, if they want the NICU team to resuscitate and try to keep their baby alive. And then on top of that, delivering a 22-week-old fetus and having to watch that baby try to fight for its life. It's moments like that where you are reminded of how life-changing every second of someone's labor course really can be. And I'm reminded of those hard moments oftentimes more than I am the good moments when I sit down and reflect, which I think is inherent to the human condition, but it's challenging.
So, well, I'm going to challenge you then to dredge up some happy things you've seen.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so many happy things. Every delivery, there's a moment where the baby's head is halfway out, and that is called crowning. And crowning is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful moments, which I know in the human experience. I actually think that is one of the most special moments to be able to be a part of, because simultaneously you have a life that is connected to its mom. It's receiving oxygen directly from the umbilical cord. It is dependent on that mom to remain alive, simply because its oxygen source is the mother. Yet it's also entering the world at the same time, and it's on the brink of taking its first breath and becoming solely dependent on its own oxygen to maintain life. And it's that micro, I mean, people crown for a long time, so it could be 5 minutes, but it could be 3 seconds where you are watching this miraculous transition of utter dependency to independence. And I think it is, like I've said multiple times, is the most special moment in this existence, truly. So, and Kristin, I think now is the time, because you actually had a really, really interesting experience where your baby was still dependent on you for oxygen as you were looking at it. Because a lot of the times when you're crowning, moms can't see their baby, but you had created an environment where you were able to look at this new life that has come out of you and is still dependent on you to sustain itself. Right?
You're referring to the fact that I did not cut the cord or have them cut the cord immediately.
No, I'm referring to the fact that you delivered this baby in a hot tub.
Well, yeah. So there were a couple things. There was that, you're talking about my fourth birth, who was delivered at home in a hot
Yes.
tub. And he came out and I said, I don't want to cut the cord till the cord stops pulsating. So he gets all the, all the blood from the placenta is out of there as much as possible. The cord sort of goes lifeless. And he was on my chest, looking into my eyes and not breathing because he didn't need to, right? He didn't need to yet.
Right.
Just like it's an interesting thing, right? He was underwater for part of that time too, right? He delivered in water.
Yeah.
And still attached to the cord, so not needing to breathe, no gills necessary. And then I pulled up my chest and looked at him and connected with him, not needing to breathe, right? Still connected to the cord.
Well, hopefully by then
And
his lungs were, hopefully by then he was crying and his lungs were opening.
I don't remember if he cried. He did open his mouth and start breathing eventually. But we should watch the video next time you're in town. You should watch the video I have of my
I would
home birth.
love to. I would love to.
Yeah.
I think I may have flipped my script on the home birthing experience just because I do believe that
flipped it
there
from
are.
what to what? From what to what? Flipped it from what to what? Where was it and where is it and when did it switch?
I think I was very interested going into this job. I was very interested in the prospect of what a home birth could look like and what that experience entails. But now 4 months into this job, I just have a deeper understanding of what can go wrong during labor and delivery. And it is a high risk in experience. And now my newly transformed opinion is you bring whatever environment you want your labor and your delivery to look like to the hospital. That room is yours to do whatever you want with it. And we have patients with all sorts of tea lights and aromatherapy and Bosu balls and anything that they are wanting to be a part of their labor experience. But we also have a monitor on the baby and we have the maneuvers available to us if the shoulders get stuck and the baby isn't able to come out. And there's just a lot of complications that can happen. And so I'm apprehensive to recommend that someone does this all on their own at home.
Yeah. Well, it'd probably be inappropriate for you to recommend it because you're not gonna, you're not doing home births, right?
Yeah.
So I've talked to midwives about this because I think I flipped my script too, but in the opposite way. Obviously, I have had a home birth after having gone through training and done, about 75 deliveries of my own when I was post medical school and in residency and after. And I feel like the conversations I've had with midwives around this say, it is inherently high risk when it's in a hospital, but the traffic of the hospital contribute to that. The kinds of pressures and processes and the way the system is structured and the fear that comes into people because they're not in their own space. There's a lot of things that change for the person giving birth that create some of those challenges that lead to some of that higher risk, which I found very interesting. And I don't know if that's been studied or how to even study that, but I thought that was an interesting comment because the risk of, the outcomes are very different in a hospital compared to home births. And whether that is about selection bias or just about what happens differently, unclear.
But is it And I'm curious if that is looking at rates of like cesarean section or looking at rates of like fetal acidosis and fetal hypoxia. And the things that I am more concerned about a home birth resulting in fetal or maternal morbidity than a pivot or change in the birth plan. And I am a firm believer in birth plans and that people should, write their own story when it comes to their labor. However, I do also think that there are a lot of complications that can occur during the delivery itself that can lead to traumatic fetal or maternal outcomes. And being in a hospital is the number one place you would want to be if your delivery is heading in that direction.
For sure. I'll say this. I pushed out Xavier, who was 10 pounds, 3 ounces. 10 pounds 1, 10 pounds 3, 10 pounds 3 ounces. Biggest baby I'd ever delivered.
Yeah.
by like 2 pounds. And the only baby of mine that I delivered in water. And I am convinced that if I had not been in water, I would have ended up with a C-section. As a result of not being able to have that kind of zero gravity experience, be able to kind of move my body around him, he corkscrew him out essentially, from within that place of zero gravity. If I had been on my back, if I had been in a hospital where I ended up on my back, I never wanted to be on my back during deliveries. All my birth plans or my hopes for my birthing had me in the squatting position like some indigenous woman. And I never could attain that because by the time I was pushing, it hurt so much and it was so uncomfortable that I needed to relax every part of my body that wasn't involved in contractions. And so I ended up on my back for all 3 of those first kids. And they were differently hard in different ways. I mean, they were all incredibly painful. And Xavier's was incredibly painful too. His was quite fast, but then it was my 4th, but he was my largest by a long shot. And I'm sure that if I had been in a hospital, he would have been a C-section.
Just because of the fetal size.
The size and because of the size. And because I needed to move around him to get him out. I needed to be moving and shifting my position and having different kind of my own maneuvers basically to kind of get him out.
Yeah. I will happily say we push in all sorts of positions, and there are birthing like showers, birthing baths, and we have patients push squatting, we have patients push on all fours, we have patients, that come in and they want to push on their side or they want to push using different breath work techniques. And those are all available to our patients. And I don't know if, your experience, you felt like there was, when you got to the hospital, there was a set way you had to do things and you didn't have a lot of autonomy. But that's my mission is the hospital is safe, but it still can be your experience. And it still can be all the things that you want it to be, but just with the safety net of if something goes wrong, you have a team there in seconds to get that baby out or to, do whatever they need to do to make sure that there's no long-term effects. And still, being in a hospital setting, there are cases where there are long-term effects. And I don't know, I think we can have both, where you don't feel so kind of sterilized and put into this, system where you have to follow everyone's rules, but yet you have eyes on you. I don't know. I've really flipped my script on this.
But you're talking about the best of both worlds. It's a compromise. I love that you're empowering women who you're working with to bring their birth plan and bring their birthing balls and bring their music and bring their tea lights and do the things. I did all that. So I did all that for my first 3 births. I really tried. I had midwives with the first 2 births, and then I had, because they also, like you, do all those things and encourage people to make it their own. And
Yeah,
I really wanted
absolutely.
that. And the 3rd birth, I had my fellow job share resident, Malika, who she and I were paired up for our residency. So she was
Hmm.
off that day, or maybe she was on that day and then came delivered. And then of course the 4th one was at home. But for each of those 3, I brought my birthing ball. I was in the shower for a lot of it. I was in the hot tub they didn't let us deliver in the tub. They get to deliver in the tub where you are?
No,
Yeah.
we do not deliver in the tub.
That's unfortunate because you have it there. It's a great, as I said, I wouldn't have delivered vaginally without the tub. But anyway, so
Hmm.
I remember the 3rd birth, Tula's birth, I wheeled into the hospital. I was like 8 centimeters. I was ready to go. And I had my birthing ball, and the chief resident who I'd trained with, right? Because I was in family medicine and we rotated through OB, and I knew him and he knew me. He took one look at me coming down the hall and he burst out laughing, like derisively.
What?
And I just ignored it because I was like, I'm not gonna
Wait,
make
laughing
I'm
at
not
what?
gonna
What was the
not have my
laughing?
birthing ball.
At the birthing
Oh, the fact that I brought a birthing ball. Yeah. Yeah.
wall?
So my point is, where I gave birth wasn't super conducive like what you're describing. So I'm really glad you're helping to create that culture of permission for women to make it their own and to have their home birth at a hospital.
And
Because
to
it's
be fair, I will say that it is not universal that OBGYNs, or even in my own hospital setting, that is um a shared ideal. It's not everyone feels like people should come in with their own plans. And I think there's a fine line between, wanting to have your own experience that is aligned with your values around this once in a lifetime, or very, very unique experience. And there's also, pushing back and fighting against the medical recommendation. And I think that is where, the second you get admitted to a hospital, and this is where the internet and where I find my job actually becoming more and more challenging, is that people have their opinions about how they want their care to be managed. And then there's pushback when it comes to medical advice. And then it feels like there's this you versus me. And then OBGYNs are just victimized on the internet for being, you know, pushy, trying to rush people out the door. Pitocin is the devil's drug, all these things that I keep hearing. And it puts me in a really hard position, because I feel like with those engagements, it's immediately, I don't trust you. And that's so hard for me, because at the end of the day, and I try to lead every admission with the statement that my goal is the same as theirs, which is a safe, healthy vaginal delivery with a healthy baby and a healthy mom. And that is our goal. And I just feel like sometimes, I don't know what people read or where they turn to for their evidence, but they come in with this mindset that the OBGYN is against them. And it's so hard.
Hmm. Well, and as much as it's frustrating and hurtful from your perspective, I'm sure it's also not very conducive to them having an easy, graceful birth, when they feel like that, when they're kind of projecting that contentiousness on the relationship.
Yes, agreed. I really agree. And I think it's a shame, honestly, because and it's not always that happens. In fact, a lot of people have a lot of trust in their doctors, as I think we should. But when it does happen, it just feels like, we're no longer a team. And I think labor, because it is so foreign to the patient, there needs to be a level of trust in the person that's going to help guide you through it. And granted, as a resident, we don't have the same relationship with these patients that the attendings do, who are seeing them for their prenatal visits at every 4 weeks in the beginning, 2 weeks, and then even 1 week. That's a long time to build trust. So I also have to recognize that these patients are coming in for, again, one of the biggest days of their life, a very vulnerable experience, a lot of fear ridden. And I think they don't know me. And so I have to also understand that as I feel frustrated sometimes, that I have to also earn their trust.
Right. So, what do you do when someone comes at you, like in triage or in a labor and delivery room, and you know that this is sort of what's going on? How do you diffuse that, or how do you connect with people despite that?
Yeah. Well, it has happened, and it's honestly not infrequent that I experience pushback or resistance or just an experience where someone wants to be in control of their situation. And I think what I've done is lead with what I had just said, lead with my goal and align that with their goal. I am so open to talking about a birth plan. A lot of people come with their birth plan printed out. I am very open to discussing the birth plan, talking about how we can fit their needs into our system. If we don't have something, how we can accommodate their wishes. And I always tell people, once you get into your room, make it you. Like, this is your day. You're going to be here for a while. So really unpack and get comfortable, because this is your space. And that really goes over very well. The other thing is, I'm constantly checking cervixes. I'm going into their body. So it's a very interesting relationship, because you are wanting to always make sure they feel safe, and they have to trust me in order to allow me to do a cervical. And no one is going to allow that if they don't have a good rapport with their provider. And so I try to be really I try to be really detailed in how I view my exams. I try to explain to them what to expect. I try to explain to them what the experience is going to feel like. I give them kind of breathing techniques that I found that really work to help ease the pain that might be associated with the exam. And I think that's been a game changer, is people, if you can do a good exam, they want you in the room, and they'll tell the nurse, they'll say, I want her back in here because she's communicative, she's not pushy, she does the exam when I'm in between contractions. Like, those simple things go a really long way. So those are some of my tools. I also just try to meet them where they're at. I think some people come in very, very fearful. Some people come in very excited. Some people come in with an arrangement of emotions because of, maybe we had a patient whose husband had passed away while she was pregnant. So this was not a exciting day for her. It was actually a really traumatizing day for her. And so things like that, I just try to be really attuned to and meet the patient where they're at, and make sure that this experience feels safe and aligned with what their goals are.
Nice. Well, you just described a lot of really beautiful shared decision-making practices. I hope other doctors are listening. Do you have anyone in the hospital who you're learning about natural birth from, natural vaginal birth?
And when you say that, are you meaning unmedicated?
Unmedicated vaginal births.
Absolutely. That's another thing that surprised me. And is that I don't know if it's the demographic, if it's the fact that it's the US, I don't know what it is, but we have very few unmedicated vaginal deliveries. Usually they're patients that have had babies in the past, because those deliveries tend to go a bit quicker. To have a first-time mom not request an epidural is few and far between, which is interesting because I was talking to some of my friends from the Netherlands, and they were saying the opposite is true for them. It is very rare that someone will take an epidural during their labor. And so I've thought a lot about it. I've actually thought a lot about it in terms of my own personal desires for labor. And I've come to a conclusion, and yes, I have these conversations a lot in terms of natural deliveries and how do we promote that as an option and not always default to medication, to an epidural, if that maybe isn't something that someone's desiring. And two things I've learned. One, labor is more painful than I could ever imagine. Watching these women come in contracting has opened my eyes to the excruciating pain that labor is. And then two, the power of a doula. I think there are a lot of benefits to having a doula in your labor room when you're delivering.
So explain what that is for people who don't know what a doula is, Megan. Tell us what a doula is.
Yes. So a doula is someone generally that has been trained in hands-on techniques to help support the laboring patient through the pains of labor. They do that emotionally, they do that through physical touch, they do it through aromatherapy, they do it through different positional changes. They have a lot of tools in their toolkit to basically support the mom at every minute during her labor to ease the experience. And I think that that is such a tool for a laboring mom because of two reasons. One, I want to be able to provide hands-on support during a contraction to ease the pain, but I can't be in the room for every laboring patient for the whole time they're in labor. It's impossible. As a resident and even just OBGYNs in general, they're constantly moving across the hospital, managing multiple patients. So we can't be in the rooms at all times. If you have a doula, you know that there is someone that is supporting you at all times throughout your labor. And then secondly, there are pressure points. It's been proven. That's why they're trained in these techniques, that if you are able to push on certain areas, if you're able to twist, like you were saying, and rotate the baby's head to help that baby corkscrew come down and really, really put pressure on the cervix, it's going to help with the dilation and ease the process, but also catalyze the process. So having that 24/7 hands-on support, both emotionally, spiritually, physically, I think is incredibly beneficial to the patients. And then,
and there are actually there's studies on this. I want to just bring up, there's a study, or maybe more than one, but I remember the midwives always saying, there's a statistically significant decrease in C-sections and operative vaginal births, which is forceps and vacuums, when a doula is present. So the midwives like to say, if a doula were a drug, it would be illegal not to give her. That's how powerful.
Oh, I like that.
Impact is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's true. I think there is so much benefit. I think there's one caveat that I will bring up, which is there are times where I think that doulas can overstep their defined role, and where then there becomes a conflict of medical management for the patient. And I think that can be unsafe because, again, it butts the OBGYN up against the patient and paints the OBGYN out to be harmful. And I think when there are moments like I like that, where there's conflict between the doula and the OBGYN. It can be very harmful to the patient's care. And at the end of the day, we are all a team, from the nurse to the doula to the OBGYN provider. Everyone has this shared collective goal. And it can be very, very challenging when there's a doula in the room that is making your life as a provider hard.
Yeah, inconvenient to have someone else question your motives. I think I might have done that once as a non-official doula. I went to the birth of a really good friend of mine from childhood. I drove to New York, actually. She had her baby in New York. It was her first child. She wanted an unmedicated birth. She wasn't progressing in labor, so they wanted to do Pitocin. She agreed to Pitocin. Then, of course, the contractions were through the roof, so much more painful with Pitocin. And she still really, really wanted to have her baby vaginally and without an epidural. And I was sitting in the room the whole time with her, and she never changed her tune. Maybe a couple times towards the end when she was basically in transition, and I was like, "This is not the time. You don't want an epidural while you're in transition."
Mhm.
Because it's all you're almost gonna get the pushing, and then it doesn't really help with pushing. It doesn't help with the pressure of
No,
pushing, right? The pain of the dilation is now over. So,
right.
but I also I was advocating for her, with the OB, and the OB was super grumpy with me. But I saw my friend, I heard her desire, and I saw that the baby was fine. The baby wasn't struggling at all. So,
Hmm.
um, I might have been one of those people that annoys you in that moment.
Okay, so can I just demystify Pitocin for a quick second? Because
Sure.
you said the words, they started the Pitocin and then her contractions became more frequent and more painful. So when you're in labor, your body is secreting oxytocin. It's a hormone that is going to help with uterine contractions. And uterine contractions are really important for getting this baby out of the vagina, because it forces the baby's head onto the cervix. And that pressure on the cervix is what's going to help the cervix dilate to 10 centimeters. And then ultimately, that same pressure, when the mom is pushing, with that pressure is what's going to help to push the baby out of this very small canal. And Pitocin is a medication. It's a synthetic form of this oxytocin that your body is naturally secreting. It binds to the same receptors, and it helps with uterine contractions. So if someone is contracting, they can have contractions that are not actually bringing the baby down and putting the head on the cervix to a degree that the cervix is dilating. So that's why sometimes we place a catheter into the uterus to actually measure how powerful the contractions are, because frequency of contraction does not necessarily correlate with power. And also pain of the contraction does not correlate with power. So we measure the power of a contraction using what's called Montevideo units. So in the case that a patient comes in labor, she's contracting, she's uncomfortable, she doesn't desire an epidural, we do a cervical exam, she's 3 centimeters dilated, and we just, allow her to labor. 4 hours later, we come back, she's still 3 centimeters dilated. The head is, decently applied onto the cervix, but it's clear to us that it's not pressing on the cervix enough to help with the dilation. So then we place the catheter, and then we see that the strength of those contractions are not hitting the proven threshold, which is 200 Montevideo units. In that case, helping with the contraction frequency and the contraction strength is going to be critical, so that labor doesn't stall, that this woman doesn't experience what's called protracted or failed induction, or experience some sort of situation that could end her in a C-section. And in those cases, this medication has proven to reduce cesarean section rates. And I think that correlating Pitocin with pain is sure true, but it's because adequate contractions are going to be painful, you know? Does that make sense?
No. Yeah, completely. I agree with everything you said. Yeah. And I will say that a lot of times I've seen women who really wanted a natural birth, unmedicated birth, move
Mhm.
from that quickly to, oh my God, I need an epidural. Now, you can argue that, well, if their own contractions had been adequate, they might have asked for an epidural then too, right? They might have not been up to that level of pain that was required to change their cervix.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll never know. And we'll never know because you can't, split them in the middle of the thing and do a study on each of their halves and whatever.
Exactly. It's
So
fascinating.
so I know you're getting to your destination, and I want to respect your time, Megan. It's Friday night, and you have a fun walk with your brother happening soon.
Yay.
Is there anything else that you haven't shared about this? And let's not even say for this audience, let's say for your future self, who might in 20 years look back at these and say, I'd like to be reminded of my intern year in OB residency in New York City. What would you like that future self to know about you that you haven't shared yet?
Mm. I think it's going to be exactly what I've kind of portrayed and made clear in this conversation, which I know you said something you haven't shared yet, but I want to say I think the system does reward efficiency, and that can be very dangerous for obstetricians. And so for me, I want to remain so grounded in exactly the words that I've shared today, which is making your labor experience yours, offering patients the autonomy to feel like this space is their own created space. Don't put pressure on them to rush the process, and motivate and just encourage and create safety in an environment where speed is often rewarded. And I think I feel very strongly about that now, 4 months in, because I'm new and I don't feel the pressures of the system in the way that a lot of people who have been around for 20 years might feel. So I want to just remind myself about this innocence and these values. And there's no reward greater than giving someone a birthing experience that they can leave so satisfied and happy about and look back on with such fond memories.
This is enough to make me want to have another baby just so you could be my provider, Megan.
Oh my goodness. I don't
It's
even know what
not
to say
going
to
to
that.
happen.
Menopause.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and for being the light you are in the world and on the OB labor and delivery floor in your chosen hospital in your chosen city. I can feel you radiating all the way in Allentown.
Oh, well, thank you for having me and for this lovely series of my journey to residency. It has not been an easy one, and I'm sure there are many trials and tribulations ahead, but for now, I'm right where I need to be.
Perfect. We'll end there. Thanks, Megan.
Yeah, thank you. Great conversation.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Healing Grove podcast. If you liked it, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to deepen your experience further, consider grabbing a copy of the Healing Grove Playbook. With journal prompts for this podcast and 41 others, it's the perfect place to record your learnings, keep track of the tools you explore, and reflect on your own experience. Finally, it's important to mention that even though I am a doctor, nothing you hear on this podcast, whether from myself or my guests, constitutes medical advice. Any intervention you try should always be discussed with and supervised by a trusted member of your own healing team. Thanks for listening, and see you next time in the Healing Grove.